Welcome, my sweet, peaceful farmers, to the first season finale to the TAPAS and Stuff Productions podcast. This was meant to come out in November 2019, 1 year after the first podcast, but after various gaps, some long depressions, some difficulties in ever getting back to the weekly schedule, first season of the podcast lasted 2.5 years instead of the intended 1 year. Yeah, I mean, that's okay. I don't imagine I'll ever get back to a life of posting one podcast every week. But things are going to change a bit in Season 2 of the podcast. Be sure to listen to the conclusion after all the normal segments. I'm going to talk about what it's going to mean when TAPAS transfers into Phase 2. For our final Keys and Kingdoms segment, before it gets spun off into its own podcast, we're wrapping up the films of 1999, starting with Toy Story 2. Now, for some reason, whenever you see a Pixar film like Toy Story in among Disney films, people always say, but that's Pixar. A lot of people don't know for some reason that Pixar's films have always belonged to Disney. The giant Disney castle that always precedes the Pixar logo is apparently too subtle for a lot of people, yes. Yes, Disney bought Pixar in 2006, but that didn't really change anything. That was just a way to keep working together after the end of their original 7-film distribution deal. The first 7 Pixar films also belong to Disney and always have. There has never been a point, apart from a couple of little tiny short cartoons made in the 80s, where Pixar did anything that did not belong to Disney. I mean, I'd say it's a little more... I'd say this misconception is it's a little more forgivable than all the people who think every 2D animated film is Disney and every 3D animated film is Pixar, regardless of, various stylistic differences. But, I mean, yeah, like I said, there's a big old Disney Castle logo, a big old Disney Presents a Pixar film, like, every time. So, I don't know. How do you miss that? All this to say, Toy Story 2 was originally going to be a direct-to-video release and be entirely handled by Disney, not Pixar. Disney has every legal right to make sequels to Pixar films anytime they want, and Pixar can't say shit about it, but fortunately, they've never actually gone through with it, despite what people assume about Pixar sequels they don't like. They've tried twice. They attempted to make Toy Story 2, and again Toy Story 3, but on both occasions, Pixar ended up hijacking the production and making it their own. Disney does have the Planes films, which are set in the same universe as Pixar's Cars, but, there's not much continuity there, just set on the same planet, so no direct sequels. People think Disney makes Pixar make sequels. Not so. Pixar sequels always come out at least 10 years after the previous film. Why would Disney order that? Pixar makes sequels when they feel like it. It takes them 10 years to come up with a good idea for a continuation. They don't fuck around, they're artists. Toy Story 2, of course, being the exception as far as not rushing things. Disney tried to make something with it, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. The idea Disney had in mind for the Toy Story sequel, this is definitely true of Toy Story 3. I think it's also true of Toy Story 2. Disney's idea was about malfunction. A malfunction becoming common in Buzz Lightyear action figures, resulting in a recall. All the Buzz toys around the world being sent back to the factory in Taiwan, and the rest of Andy's toys wanting to rescue their Buzz. Sounds dumb, and both times Pixar took over the production, and both times they scrapped what Disney had and created a film not only better than what Disney had in mind, but a film vastly superior to the previous Toy Story film. Toy Story is a Renaissance classic that changed the landscape of film and animation. Toy Story 2 proved that Pixar are the boldest storytellers in Hollywood, the craftsmen who make men cry. And Toy Story 3 is a very fit contender for the title of Best Animated Film of all time. Toy Story 4 is a film that also doesn't cause cancer. So, yeah, Pixar's third film, its first sequel, and the shortest sequel gap the studio has ever had, coming out only 4 years after the original because, again, it started life as a Disney-made cash grab before Pixar took over production, completely got rid of what Disney had, and started from scratch. 9 fucking months before the film was set for a now theatrical release. most animated films take 3 or 4 years to complete, Pixar productions veering on the longer side because of tender loving care. Toy Story 2 was made from the ground up in 9 months. Oh, and at one point during that 9-month production, they lost the entire film, and their asses were saved by the amazing stroke of luck that someone had a copy on her home computer. The other rule breakers of the decade wait for a sequel are both Cars sequels. Cars 2 coming out only 5 years after the first, and Cars 3 6 years after the second, so a bit speedy by Pixar standards, but again, I don't blame that on how very, very well those films do in merch sales. John Lasseter just loves his Cars universe. And whatever happened to him? Where is he these days? Last I heard, he was with some other studio, and I don't know anything about that or what they were working on, except that when he was signed on, Emma Thompson quit whatever it is they were working on in protest. I don't know if maybe she had a bad experience with Lasseter on Brave, or just knew about his reputation, but with the prelude out of the way, let's start watching the film. For some reason, Disney Plus is set at 4 minutes into the film. Have I started watching it at some point? I don't remember doing that. Anyway, from the top. We open in space! In a real Buzz Lightyear adventure, soon revealed to be a video game Rex is playing. It's a lot of fun, it shows off the capabilities the character allegedly has, a lot of quick thinking. None of it makes any sense as video game mechanics, of course, but it's one of those things that's just so epic that it's ridiculous. I love things like that. This film looks like so much better than the first one, A Bug's Life looked a lot better than the first Toy Story, and Toy Story 2 in turn looks a lot better than that, but everything that came after doesn't look that much better than Toy Story 2, because Toy Story 2, they basically perfected it. So yeah, I like this sci-fi layer, the traps, the obstacles, Buzz's anti-gravity utility belt. That's a bit of a motif in the film. It's a feature of this new video game, which Andy's Buzz is not equipped with. And we at last meet Emperor Zurg, much hyped from the first film. His design is okay, I guess, doesn't blow me away, but, he's got his clear elements as a Darth Vader parody. His voice is digitally deepened, and beneath that distortion, he's voiced by Pixar's own Andrew Stanton, a future director of Finding Nemo and WALL-E. Really top-notch filmmaker with a lot of passion and nostalgia, and a very good voice actor. The prologue ends anticlimactically when Zurg vaporizes Buzz's upper body. Cut to Rex despairing at how he's once again failed to defeat Zurg. Meanwhile, Woody is preparing for Andy's annual trip to cowboy camp. We see all the toys returning as Woody looks for his hat, as well as the Christmas gifts mentioned at the end of the film. Continuity, motherfuckers. There's Mrs. Potato Head, played by Estelle Harris, who would become much more prominent come Toy Story 3, and Buster, a little wiener dog puppy, who has a good relationship with Woody. Apparently toys are perfectly willing to show themselves around dogs, and can just be themselves, get to know the dogs and stuff. There's early foreshadowing here of themes, Bo Peep assuring Woody that Andy loves him with or without a cowboy hat. They do find the hat, and Andy gets in a little playtime before it's time to go to camp, introducing us to Ham's alter ego as the evil Dr. Porkchop, and that Andy has, rather heartwarmingly, started to cast Woody and Buzz as a heroic duo. That's very nice, but in the chaos, the stitching in Woody's shoulder rips, exposing his stuffing. Dejected, Andy quickly makes the decision not to bring Woody to cowboy camp and risk damaging him further, so his mom puts Woody up on the dusty old top shelf where other old and damaged things of Andy's go. Woody is heartbroken as he watches the family van pull away to bring Andy to camp. He has a pretty scary nightmare about Andy abandoning him because he's broken. Props to John Morris here. Morris played Andy in all 3 Toy Story films of the Andy era. Had to come up with an addendum just there, now that there's a dumb old 4th film. Anyway, he had to audition each time, as he was, a small child at the time of the first film, in his early teens in the second, and in his mid-20s in the third. He did good. It's very believable in Toy Story 2 that not very much time has passed. He still sounds like a little kid. And he was blessed with a very youthful, natural speaking voice in his adulthood. He didn't do any acting at all between Toy Story 2 and 3, but Pixar were committed to tracking him down and trying to get him to reprise the role, and were thrilled at the sound of his voice. I wonder what he's doing these days. Surely he was on a career path of some sort when they found him. I saw a lot of rumors after Toy Story 3 that he'd be doing more voice acting, but it seems those were just that, rumors. I probably said most of that 6 episodes ago when I covered Toy Story 1. I'm sorry. Just, lots of information I've been dying to share since this podcast started, and I totally forgot what I have said already, thanks to the, gaps. Also, props to the nightmare symbolism of Woody being dragged to hell by a bunch of severed arms. That's a nice touch, and, it's not gruesome because they're toy arms. Woody can't actually move his ripped arm. I'm not sure how toy biology works. This film in particular raises a few questions about it. I'll discuss, when they come up. Woody wakes up from his nightmare and sees that he's sharing the shelf with Wheezy, a squeaky penguin played by Joe Ranft, who's been on the shelf since he stopped squeaking. Oh, hey, dust particles. That's a new thing, and Pixar's always been really good at that sort of thing. Why do the dust particles make toys cough? Toys don't have lungs to be obstructed. See, there's one. There's one right there. Woody, from his high vantage point, is the first to see that Mom is taking the opportunity of Andy's absence to have a yard sale. Get rid of some old stuff without his notice. She rifles through Andy's room. Old roller skates, a puzzle, most of the stuff up on the top shelf, including Wheezy. Without hesitation or even a moment to explain to any of the other toys, Woody rides on Buster's back to go rescue the penguin. You can't keep doing that forever, but perhaps he's in a particularly no-one-gets-left-behind mood due to his own injury. Woody smuggles Wheezy back into the house, but has to go limp when some of the yard sale shoppers spot him, including one Al McWiggin, a fat, balding nerd played by Wayne Knight, who seems to recognize Woody and be extremely excited about finding him. He tries to play it casual with Andy's mom, but she realizes she must have made a mistake and tells him Woody's not for sale, even after he drops the facade and offers her $50 and then his watch. But the other toys watch helplessly from the window, as Al waits until Mom's back is turned and steals Woody. Buzz tries to catch him, but Al drives away in his fancy show car, leaving Buzz with 2 clues, a vanity license plate and large white feathers in the trunk of the car. While the toys ponder what to do about this kidnapping, Buzz decodes the license plate and realizes that Al is the very Al who owns Al's Toy Barn, and appears in commercials for the shop wearing a chicken costume. Al puts Woody on display in his flashy penthouse apartment. There's that classic gag with Al griping about having to drive all the way to work, which serves a purpose. It establishes that Al's workplace is right across the street from his apartment, which makes this mission actually doable for our toy heroes, and provides a great joke. Woody tries to escape the apartment, but can't find an exit, and soon encounters a trio of Western-themed dolls like himself. The silent Bullseye the horse, Jessie the cowgirl, played by Joan Cusack, and Stinky Pete the prospector, played by Kelsey Grammer. Stinky Pete is still mint in box, and despite his kooky old prospector hee characterization, he speaks in Grammer's deep and hyper-articulate voice, and the other characters just call him the prospector, so he has more dignity. Like Al, these toys are very excited to see Woody, and he doesn't understand why until they show him the merchandise. As it turns out, Woody is a piece of merchandise from a 1950s TV show called Woody's Roundup, and his fellow cast members are quick to show him the VHS tapes they have of the show. Pixar, takes this opportunity to make fun of TV from the 50s. It's made really, really badly with cheap marionettes and all sorts of production errors, which naturally Pixar meticulously animates. Apparently, some people think they made real marionettes for these scenes. Nope, that ain't them, except in WALL-E. But despite the show's problems, Woody is enthralled. And I like this theme song. I'm really into Western music, just a little something my grandparents passed along to me, I guess. I wonder what band Pixar got to play this song. I think I saw a featurette about them recording it once, but it was when the movie was new. I was little. Maybe it aired on TV, or maybe it was, they played after the movie on the Toy Story 2 VHS tape, something like that. Anywho, this revelation raises a few questions about the Toy Story universe. One question leads to another. When asked why Bullseye doesn't talk, even though other animal toys like Slinky do, I believe it was Lee Unkrich who replied with the old, "Why doesn't Pluto talk but Goofy does?" question. That's a stupid question, one you know the answer to if you've been following this podcast, but my assumption would be Bullseye behaves more like a pet because that's how he acted in the TV show. On the other hand, in the show, the Prospector is very much the aforementioned kooky Prospector type, while the toy the Prospector we encounter behaves very differently and seems embarrassed by his TV counterpart. So that's a curiosity. But my biggest question here: why is Woody discovering all this for the very first time? Buzz knows all the details about the Buzz Lightyear franchise, to the point of having come out of the box believing he was the real thing. Why has Woody never heard of Woody's Roundup? In Toy Story 4, Woody makes an offhand remark that he's not entirely sure how old he is, just estimating that he was made in the 50s. Presumably, the only reason he knows he's that old is because he discovered Woody's Roundup in this film. Where has Woody been since the 50s, and why does he clearly not know the answer to that question? All we really know is that he's been with Andy's family for a long time, long enough for Andy's mom to have a sentimental attachment to him, as indicated when she's telling Al that Woody's not for sale, that he's a family heirloom. Maybe Woody lost his memory at some point somehow. I honestly wouldn't mind a whole film delving into Woody's backstory, because I really do have questions about where he came from. Meanwhile, Andy's toys have found the address to Al's store. Buzz sets off, accompanied by Mr. Potato Head, Slinky, Rex, and Ham. It's a long walk for toys, over 20 blocks, but Buzz is willing to do anything after what Woody's been through for him. Bo Peep doesn't come along for, the same reason she was written out of Toy Story 3 entirely. As a porcelain figure, she's quite literally too delicate for all the action and peril. It takes the complete character overhaul she receives in Toy Story 4 to get her into the thick of the action without worrying about her too much, Later into the night, Woody is watching the final episode of Woody's Roundup. Jessie and the Prospector are trapped in an old abandoned mine, requiring Woody and Bullseye to race in and rescue them before the dynamite in the mine goes off. This bit contains one of my favorite types of gag. The critters Jessie sent for help give a monosyllabic squeak, just a which Woody interprets as an incredibly detailed explanation of the peril Jessie is in. I love that gag. It's one of my favorite types of joke. Right up there with the one where there's a poem or a song, and you think you know what word is coming at the end of a line to make it rhyme, but they unexpectedly swap that out for a different word that doesn't rhyme. Kristen and Bobby Lopez seem fond of that gag, as they put it in their songs in both Winnie the Pooh and Frozen, but, I'm getting ahead of myself, obviously. Say, here's a question. What exactly are smithereens? Whenever a person dies in an explosion, we say they were blown to smithereens. What's a smithereen? Dictionary.com, help me out. It's from an 1820s Anglo-Irish dialect. Just means the same thing as smithers, which are small fragments of things. Makes sense to me. They had a lot of Irish people out in the Old West, where you hear this term a lot. The Irish were put into forced labor just like black and Chinese people were. Yeah, in 19th century America, Irish people were equally as discriminated against as black and Asian people were. There's a brief joke on that subject in Blazing Saddles, which, it's like right before the climax of that film, and it's a heartwarming demonstration of the movie's whole point of just how stupid racism is, No one today can imagine being racist against the Irish, so, why does it then make sense to people to mistreat black, Asian, and indigenous folks? It's stupid. Anyway, Woody's Roundup, as it turns out, ends with a cliffhanger of Woody and Bullseye taking a mighty leap across a canyon. The series ends there. Apparently, America never found out if Woody landed safely on the other side and saved his friends. According to the Prospector, when Sputnik went up in 1957, children didn't want to play with cowboys anymore, so the show's popularity fizzled out. Woody looks around at the mountains of Woody's Roundup merch that Al has collected over the years, the centerpiece being the dolls of the main characters. Now that Al has finally gotten his hands on a Woody doll, he can sell the collection to Tokyo's Konishi Toy Museum. That information puts a stop to Woody's enthusiasm. He can't go to Tokyo, he's got to go back to Andy's house. This revelation causes Jessie to have a panic attack at the notion of Al packing them all back into his storage unit or wherever, and they don't have time to dwell on it before Al returns. While Al is putting the dolls in some poses to show Mr. Konishi, Woody's damaged arm is lost completely. So, while Al makes arrangements to have it repaired, Woody waits for Al to fall asleep and tries to sneak up and get his arm out of Al's shirt pocket so he can get home to Andy. Obstacles include the cheese puffs Al was eating before falling asleep. Here's another toy biology moment. Why can Woody smell Al's breath? Why does that intake make him feel faint? And if that's not enough, Bullseye licks cheese puff dust off of Al's fingers. Where is that food matter going? Why does a presumably non-wet plastic tongue tickle Al's fingers? I mean, it's a genre convention, that the undead cannot taste or feel, right? Because they're dead, to which I say, how in the hell does that make sense? They can see and hear, why would they have 2 of the 5 senses, but not another 2? Dead bodies don't have any senses. Whether the undead can smell depends on, well, the type. If they're zombies or vampires or ghouls, anything that feeds on the living, they can usually smell. But if they're not, then, they can't. I maintain that doesn't make sense, though in a conversation recently, it was suggested to me that, maybe that's just sort of part of the punishment of being an undead mockery of life, You can see and hear because that's how most living beings perceive the world, but you can't taste or feel because those spark joy, and you can't do that if you become a perversion of life that is an undead. Anyway, we're not talking about undead, although, just... It's a worthy K&K note there that, constructs do not have a sense of smell or, so any metabolism so they can't be poisoned or, stuff like that. Yeah, I'll forgive the toys having full sensory perception, and I guess if Bullseye's tongue isn't wet, it doesn't actually absorb the cheese puff, so maybe he can taste it. I'm just saying that's a strange little detail. This film isn't really giving me shit for Keys and Kingdoms, it's mostly just making me wonder what's going on in the Toy Story universe, which is, super not the point of this project or of the film. The purpose of the Toy Story films are to get you to feel feels, not wonder how living toys work. Only total jerk-offs pick apart that sort of thing. Anyway, Woody is prevented from taking his arm back when the TV suddenly turns back on at full blast, waking Al. Al goes to bed properly with the arm, and Woody is stuck again. He blames Jessie for the TV turning on, and they get in a big physical fight. The prospector breaks it up, but Jessie is still very much full of venom at Woody's intent to abandon them, which, sensible thing to be angry about, I'd say. It's early in the morning when Buzz and company find they've reached Al's toy barn, or at least are across the street from it. It's a busy 4-lane street, and they cross it by hiding under traffic cones, causing many, many accidents. They do a lot of reckless stuff in this trilogy, but this is easily the worst they ever did. They make it safely across, which is far more than can be said for the drivers on that road. The camera is sure to poke at us with the dramatic irony that if they hadn't crossed the street, they'd have been closer to where Al is actually keeping Woody. Obviously, there's no way for them to have known that. They only know Al's workplace, not his home address. Going to the store was obviously the best chance they had. It's just, kind of ironic. Back at Al's apartment, we meet his contact, identified in the film simply as the cleaner. This is an excellent story. Pixar's original intention had been for Al himself to restore Woody to pristine, collectible condition, but they soon figured that the way they'd characterized Al as a slobbish, greedy neckbeard meant he simply isn't that kind of toy collector who's capable of tender, loving care to actually restore his toys. But what then were they to do? They didn't have time to create a new human character model. Fortunately, they had one on hand. Jerry, the elderly chess player from the short film that preceded A Bug's Life. Jerry is inserted into Toy Story 2 as is, and while in the original short film the non-verbal Jerry was voiced by Bob Peterson, a writer at Pixar who would go on to give the company a lot of its most iconic voice roles, such as Roz, Mr. Ray, and Doug, here he's voiced by Jonathan Harris, who, if I recall, was actually the original inspiration for the character and was already in contact with Pixar that year after having played Manny in A Bug's Life. Jerry brings out his kit. I like the theme music in this scene. It's like Randy Newman is channeling Danny Elfman. And weirdly, they cut back to the toys at Al's Toy Barn before Jerry gets started. I question that structural choice, but again, this film was made in a big damn hurry. I'll let little stuff like that slide. Before beginning, Jerry tells Al that you can't rush art, and a lot of people find that to be kind of a good motto for Pixar, As I said, it takes 3 or 4 years to make an animated film. Pixar takes a bit longer so they can savor it, and as I think more people need to fucking understand, that's why Pixar always waits a full decade before making a sequel. They savor their art. They wait for story ideas that are worth the telling. So it's a very good line that really sticks with people, and and really makes you think it's like a Pixar mission statement, though. Of course, it's rather ironic that the line is said in this film, which was an insane rush job and turned out amazing regardless, so clearly sometimes you can rush art, but you shouldn't, is, I think, the point there. Jerry works his magic, very carefully buffing up Woody with his various paints and solvents, working with amazing precision despite his elderly, shaky hands. It's quite a beautiful scene. He sews Woody's arm back on, and ends it all by painting over Andy's name on the bottom of Woody's boot. Good as new, Woody is returned to the display case. Andy's toys sneak their way into Al's toy barn. It's still early in the morning, hence why they're able to openly walk the halls of the place, just, before employees are showing up, but it's not open yet. They split into 3 groups to search for Al's office, while Rex finds a strategy guide for his Buzz Lightyear video game. He notes with some bitterness that it's just about impossible to find the actual secret to defeating Zurg without buying the strategy guide first. Ain't that the truth sometimes? Of course, in the internet age, every video game has insanely detailed walkthroughs you can get for free anywhere someone's put one together, so strategy guides are pretty obsolete now. For myself, I find I can seldom get through a game without consulting a walkthrough at least a couple of times to figure out where I'm supposed to go or what tactics to use against a certain enemy, and for myself, I feel like that brings a sense of community to my gaming adventures. Oh, you can briefly see the price on the strategy guide. It's $4 American, $50 Canadian. That's funny. The Canadian dollars, you see, have always been slightly weaker than American dollars, and in anything sold in both places, you'll see that the item costs slightly more in Canada. Like, something that's $4 American will be maybe $6 Canadian, and Pixar kind of went for the throat with that gag. Buzz, searching alone, finds himself in the Buzz Lightyear aisle, which, true to its name, sells nothing but dozens upon dozens of identical copies of himself. As is alluded a couple of times in the first 2 movies, he's very much in demand. The utility belt featured in Rex's video game has been added to the action figure, and thinking it might be useful, Buzz attempts to take the utility belt off of the Buzz Lightyear in the big display case. We get the implication that toys still on store shelves don't come to life most of the time. Unfortunately, those in display cases totally do, and that Buzz Lightyear is even more delusional than our own is. I had a storybook once that referred to this character as New Buzz to distinguish him from Andy's Buzz, and I will be doing likewise. New Buzz thinks the aisle is a hypersleep chamber and that they're all space rangers waiting in stasis for Star Command to call upon them. The fact that all of these space rangers are also apparently Buzz Lightyear doesn't seem to strike New Buzz as odd. Andy's Buzz tries to reason with him, but New Buzz outfights him and sticks him in a box. The other Foy toys reunite, driving around in a little car to search faster, and they enter the Barbie aisle. Pixar had hoped to feature a Barbie in the first film as a Sarah Connor-esque anti-hero who rescues Woody, but Mattel rejected the offer. Like a lot of people who turned down Toy Story, they regretted the decision, and so we get this Barbie sequence here in Toy Story 2, and a Barbie owned by Andy's sister Molly becomes part of the main cast in Toy Story 3. This film's Barbies, at least the ones that get solo dialogue, are played by Jodie Benson, most prominently a tour guide Barbie who drives them around for a little while. They go with the fairly standard Barbie joke of these guy toys being very aroused by the Barbies. You think about it, it is a little bit odd how leggy and curvy and buxom Barbie is, and the face full of makeup. Actually, now that I think about that, that's not unlike a Disney princess, actually. There are a lot of visual similarities. Indeed, I used to think Disney princess dolls were actually co-productions with Barbie, that they had the exact same body mold, but then I realized, no, they're meant to be Barbie's competition. They're pretty close in appearance and shape, but they're not the same. Indeed, I made that mistake in my Toy Story fanfic, which I'll be discussing at some future point in the fanfic segment in a couple of months, I guess. And people think Barbies and princesses are, bad for children for that reason, that, because they're grown women with boobs and all that, and I say that's pretty fucking stupid. You want children to only play with dolls that are children? You'd never say that about a boy. Why shouldn't young children admire adult-ish women who are attractive and have secondary sexual characteristics because they're women? It's some bullshit. Barbie gets a lot of hate. I'm a fan myself. I think the only thing I'm aware of that Barbie really ever did wrong, that people didn't blow out of proportion just because society hates everything young girls enjoy, was the whole Oreo Barbie incident. That was a mistake. Yeah, people are just way too hard. It's another thing Barbies and Disney princesses have in common. People are just way too hard on them, just picking apart all their flaws. I mean, it's because they're women. That's why they do that. There's an excellent shout-out to Jurassic Park when Rex falls out of the car, tries to catch up, and Mr. Potato Head sees him coming in the rearview mirror. That's fucking funny. That's the kind of reference that works well in animated films. It's a reference that the kids watching it will get and think they're clever for getting, because, Jurassic Park. Kids have seen that movie. So, yeah, just while I think of all the movie references that are made in the film Madagascar that are just a waste of time, but one that the kids will get, and will realize it's a reference. That's funny. They run into new Buzz, who trusts these new strangers upon hearing Rex eagerly exclaim that he knows how to defeat Zurg. New Buzz not knowing the context, he goes along with them. It strains credulity that they never realize this isn't their Buzz, even though, he treats them like complete strangers and thinks he's the real Buzz Lightyear again. Buzz is left trapped in a box, giving a big no! One of numerous Star Wars allusions in the Buzz Lightyear plotline of this film. Al takes his promo photos and goes to the office to fax them to Mr. Kanishi. Remember fax machines? I don't think I ever had one. Woody is triumphant and bitterly parts ways with Jessie, ready to sneak out the air vents. People can't really travel through ventilation systems, despite what most action movies will tell you, but toys totally can. So this film gets an obvious pass. The prospector urges Woody to have one conversation with Jessie before he departs. He has to go back to Andy, he tells her, and Jessie retorts that she knows the feeling. She had an owner too, Emily. And the story is told to us in song by Sarah McLachlan. The song is called When She Loved Me, and basically it's the first Pixar tearjerker, and what a floodgate of waterworks that led to, am I right? Now, Randy Newman's always been known to be a pretty lazy songwriter. Has anyone else noticed that this song in particular doesn't even rhyme? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. But no, I get it. The song conveys the emotion in great simplicity, and McLachlan's performance tugs at the heartstrings. Newman pulled off something similar in Cars with the equally lazy but equally heartbreaking Our Town. At least Our Town has a chorus, which rhymes, while the verses, like this one, do not. Anyway, Jessie tells the story of Emily, the kid she had in the distant past. Anyway, in a scene reminiscent of Woody being swept off the bed and replaced with Buzz, Jessie found herself and all of Emily's Woody's Roundup merch swept under the bed and replaced by makeup, nail polish, and some particularly groovy stuff that places these events in the 60s or 70s. Jessie lives under Emily's bed for a while, until Emily is cleaning one day, finds her, smiles at her, and promptly donates her to charity. Jessie speaks what may be the film's signature line: "You never forget kids like Emily or Andy, but they forget you." The prospector further asks Woody to consider what's he going to do with his life when Andy grows up. Andy at college, Andy on his honeymoon. And so Woody makes his choice. He'll stay with them and live eternally as a collector's item behind glass in the Kanishi Museum. There it is, I mentioned it in the first film. In no way does Pixar delve into why or how toys come to life in this universe, they just do. What they delve into is what living in that universe feels like. Every installment of the franchise just digs more and more into what life is like for toys, often with a neat little metaphor in there somewhere about growing older in general. So yeah, this is where that started. For now, Woody decides to stay with the Roundup gang. The really good part comes later when he clashes with Buzz on the decision. I'm getting excited about that bit. For now, we find the other toys in Al's office searching for Woody. They encounter a pair of Rock'em Sock'em robots. Classic. Those are funny. They are voiced by John Lasseter and Lee Unkrich. Lasseter never did nearly as much acting as the other Pixar creators, but when he does, he's pretty well unrecognizable. I guess he's kind of good at it. I wonder why he didn't do it more often. And I suppose Lee Unkrich doesn't do much either, probably a bit less than Lasseter overall, but Joe Ranft obviously acted prominently in every Pixar film before his death. Andrew Stanton's taken on a few biggish roles. Pete Docter's never taken on a big role like Stanton or Ranft did, but he's been around as a voice actor, doing stuff. Andy's Buzz finally breaks out of the box just as Al faxes the photos to Mr. Kanishi. New Buzz and the other four hide in Al's bag as he returns to his apartment, the addition of Woody having apparently multiplied the price Kanishi was willing to pay by 10. That's a little absurd. Prices don't normally go up that much. Andy's Buzz pursues them, very relieved to find out that Al lives just across the street. But in his pursuit, he accidentally unleashes an Emperor Zurg action figure, who spots him from a distance and begins pursuing him with the intent to destroy Buzz Lightyear. Al contrivedly leaves his bag in the car, so new Buzz has to lead Andy's toys to the penthouse via the air vents and the elevator shaft. This scene finally gives some attention to the utility belt, which, like Buzz himself, contains things it can't possibly contain. We see here a grappling hook, a pair of little magnets Buzz uses to climb up the elevator shaft, the other four dangling below him from the grappling hook, and a button that glows blue, which, in the context of the Buzz franchise, is an anti-gravity servo, seen in action in the video game at the beginning. I'll note that for other, Starship Ranger accessories, those things. Another toy biology point of inquiry, why do they get tired when they exert themselves? They should be like golems or other constructs, completely immune to fatigue. I'm noting that for sure, that, living toys, no fatigue. The 4 Woody's Roundup dolls are packed in custom-fitted insulation inside Al's luggage. As Al gets the rest of the collection on a truck to be shipped to Tokyo, the dolls celebrate their upcoming new lives. Woody is apparently ticklish. I won't question that so soon after the previous question. And as they're goofing around, Buzz and the others burst into Al's apartment via the very vent Woody had hoped to escape through earlier. After a brief moment of confusion when Andy's Buzz catches up to them, they stage this scene so that it looks as if it was shot in live action with one actor playing both Buzzes, so they never overlap. There always seems to be a bit of a seam in the scenery between them. It's a cute little bit of directing. Andy's Buzz quickly proves that he's, well, exactly that, and he gives new Buzz a quick bit of galactic legalese that clears up the issue for him. Woody tells the others that he fully intends to go to the museum, and Buzz is aghast. Buzz turns Woody's own words back on him. You're not a collector's item, you are a child's plaything. You are a toy. And Woody retorts, for how much longer? Buzz reminds Woody that he always said being a child's toy is what makes life worth living. What kind of life would it be to sit behind glass and just be watched forever? Woody watches the Woody's Roundup episode he left on TV, which features him singing, You've Got a Friend in Me. This moment doesn't get enough attention. They got Tom Hanks to sing the series theme song. Amusingly, when Tom Hanks first signed on to do an animated film, he specifically asked them not to make him sing, but there we go. Seeing a child on TV adoring the Woody marionette so much he can't help but give it a hug, Woody turns on his heel, not wanting to miss a moment of Andy's childhood. He asks the Roundup gang to come with him. Bullseye is enthusiastic, but before he can get an answer out of Jesse, the prospector bursts out of his box and puts the grate back on the air vent, telling them in no uncertain terms that he's going to the museum. Having never known a child's love in his life, having spent decades on the shelf of a dime store before Al found him, he wants the glory of being a museum piece. Let's talk a little bit about those infamous Disney twist villains. They're notorious for them these days, and I'm not entirely sure it's deserved. Yes, most of Disney's classic villains are from the Renaissance or earlier. The truly loathsome bastards you love to hate are a bit hard to come by here in the 21st century. Who's to blame? That's hard to say. Disney twist villains do go back as far as this year we're talking about right now, but no one ever really griped about it back then. During the experimental era, we had Yzma, but basically no other classical villains. The revival started us off well, with Dr. Facilier and Mother Gothel both being very well-received Disney villains, but the question of whatever happened to classic Disney villains, like in the Renaissance, is a question people only started asking here in the current age, even though an entire 10-year-long era passed between the Renaissance and the revival. Twist villains started poking their head out, as I said, right here in 1999. They're just... And the thing is, they just weren't handled quite so sloppily as they are these days, is the thing. Clayton in Tarzan and Commander Rourke in Atlantis are shifty characters from the very beginning. Their portrayal is a shock to the characters, not to the audience. They bring tension to the story by making the audience wonder when they're going to strike. Tension by having the heroes confide in them when we know they shouldn't. A shocking plot twist, by necessity, doesn't have all that tension leading up to it. Ask anybody who their favorite Pixar villain is, nobody's going to say Mr. Waternoose, but a ton of people are going to say Randall. Mr. Waternoose's villainous reveal is impactful primarily because it increases the threat of Randall, the villain of the piece everyone actually came to see. If you take Mr. Waternoose there and the Prospector here, they have motivations that are plainly spoken throughout all of their screen time and make perfect sense upon a rewatch. consistent with both their fatherly facade and their villainous reveal. So who's to blame for the perceived modern trend of twist villains, the ones who just don't have the chance to impact the first 2 acts of the story because they come out of nowhere? Well, someone very dear to me once pointed the finger at Miles Axelrod. Gotta say, no, that's not it. Nobody cares about Cars 2. I'm sorry, Kenzie, it's true. Is it King Candy? Kinda. He was followed by 3 consecutive twist villain movies in which his actor Alan Tudyk played an unsavory character who is something of a decoy villain, but I'd hardly call King Candy himself a twist villain. He's antagonistic from the get-go, and his attempt to paint himself as not the bad guy is late in the film and short-lived. The real twist was of his true identity, which was, I suppose, not entirely relevant, but made sense given all the previous context, and was a delightfully shocking moment. It was good. No, the one to blame is Hans. Of course, it's fucking Hans. You knew that's where I was going. He poses as the main love interest before, playing his hand when the 3rd act starts. As such, we have only a 3rd act to register this character as the villain, and on a rewatch, even if his motivations do line up with the context he's given about himself, it just doesn't work because he doesn't drop hints throughout the way Waternoose or the Prospector do. It's like they just weren't clever enough for that, like they thought a single hint would give the whole game away, so they don't offer any, but you really can't do that. Some people point to his over-the-top goodness as being a hint that he's just playing a part, but no, being really, really good at pretending to be a protagonist is not a sufficient hint toward a character actually being a duplicitous villain the whole time. I'm sorry, cough, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., cough. Have you seen people grasp at straws pointing at all the ways the lyrics of Love is an Open Door hint at Hans's true intentions? It's pretty ridiculous. Possibly we can attribute this to how late in the game it was decided that Elsa wouldn't be the main villain of the piece, but don't quote me on that. I don't know the production timeline there. Bellwether suffers the same problem, that of no build-up whatsoever. Could you hear my phone ringing just now? Because I couldn't. It's weird. When my air conditioner's on, I can't hear a thing, which is weird because it's not especially loud. It just somehow kills all the other sound waves in my apartment. I can't hear my alarm clock or any videos I watch or my dog whining when he needs something. It's weird. So what are we talking? Twist villains. I give Professor Callahan a pass. He's a masked supervillain. Of course, his identity had to be concealed. Likewise, Screenslaver in Incredibles 2. I think that all Callahan was really missing was the movie having done more throughout to make us, the audience, suspect Tadashi, while the heroes run with their assumption that it's Cray behind the mask. I'll try to remember to talk about that more later when I do cover Big Hero 6. Pixar's Luca, released only days ago as of this writing, impressed people with something: that it has a straightforward villain. No twist villain, no evildoer who needs and gets a redemption like in Moana or Raya, no taking Pixar's usual route of generally just lacking a villain, having at most an antagonistic character, but for the most part mainly just obstacles. Ercole in Luca is a straight-up villain who starts the film as a teenager who bullies younger children, already terrifying, and ends the film chasing said children with a harpoon. It's an effective villainous arc. He's also very flamboyant and fabulous like a Renaissance villain, but still, he's not a classical villain. He's not the kind of guy who could pull off, "I wish to be the most powerful sorcerer in the world," or "The sea and all of its spoils bow to my power." The classic villains are dangerous on a large scale. Ercole is just a teenage boy with a harpoon he can't aim. I just don't think the villains in more mundane and intimate films ever really stand the test of time. The exception being Cruella, who gets by on, fabulous charisma. Okay, side rant over. Incidentally, before You've Got a Friend in Me starts, you can hear a snippet of dialogue suggesting that the prospector actually deceived Woody to get him more emotionally invested in the situation, and presumably Jesse and Bullseye as well, as they're equally blindsided by the prospector's duplicitous nature. The dialogue we hear on the TV suggests that the cliffhanger Woody saw earlier was not actually the final episode of Woody's Roundup. We hear what certainly sounds like Woody rescuing Jesse from the mines. It's a moment after that where Woody realizes it was the prospector, not Jesse, who woke up Al the night before. Al returns and packs up the dolls, and Andy's toys are slowed by the appearance of Zurg, who engages in a fierce battle with New Buzz atop the elevator, dropping the bombshell that he is Buzz's father, just before Rex knocks him down the elevator shaft. New Buzz weeps for the loss of his father, but joy! He survived the fall, and New Buzz and Zurg begin catching up as father and son. Andy's toys leave him behind and hijack a Pizza Planet truck to pursue him. Again, the incredible recklessness these toys display sometimes, lols. So yes, being only one of only 2 Pixar films, those being the first 2 Toy Story films where the Pizza Planet truck gets more than a cameo, yeah? During the ride, Mr. Potato Head saves the lives of the 3 Pizza Planet aliens dangling from the rearview mirror, who proceed to become members of the main cast, kinda. In that they're always around, but the lack of shit they actually do is kind of amazing. I mean, it's forgivable here. They're introduced right at the beginning of the film's climax, and they're just, a funny gag to follow Mr. Potato Head around for the rest of the movie. But in Toy Story 3, they don't even have any dialogue in the film's second act. What's up with that? The toys pursue Al's luggage into a labyrinth of conveyor belts, freeing Woody and the Prospector from the case for a final battle. A battle in which the Prospector is sure to re-rip Woody's shoulder, which, hey, good way for Andy to never find out anything happened, am I right? And he doesn't cripple it or anything. Unlike with the original rip, Woody can still move that arm because reasons. Woody is saved by his friends, and they stick the Prospector into a Barbie backpack, whose owner thinks nothing of taking in an old Prospector. Though the sight of her very customized Barbie does not have the Prospector looking forward to his new life. And you can see why, just because once that kid is through with him, he's definitely not going to be a collector's item anymore. But personally, I think finally being owned by a child will result in good things for the Prospector's future. I think it's what toys need, and he simply never had it. In hindsight, I've often complained about the final fate of Toy Story 3's villain being a little bit too much of a rehash for that of the Prospector, but in retrospect, I think Prospector's fate is more merciful. It's more the potential for redemption, whereas Lotso's is pure torture, which is good because he does far more evil things. The toys get Bullseye out of the case, but fail to rescue Jessie in time before she's put on a luggage cart. Woody and Buzz mount Bullseye and chase her down in an epic chase befitting the Roundup Gang. One gag I've always liked, while the airline workers are loading the luggage into the plane, they don't give a fuck about a box labeled fragile and just freely toss it aside, and you hear glass shattering. It's funny because it's true. I don't know. I like the gags in this film that I really appreciated for their subtlety when I was a kid, I was, 7 years old when this movie came out, and, starting to appreciate some subtlety. Woody gets into the luggage hold and finally gets Jessie out of the case as the plane is driving down the runway. They do an epic swashbuckling swing on Woody's pull string and reunite with Buzz and Bullseye just as the plane takes off. Jessie is especially eager to find out that Andy has a little sister, though nothing really comes of that. If Molly and Jessie ever did have a relationship, it was never shown in the series. By the very nature of the plot of Toy Story 3, that required 11-year-old Molly to feel like she's too old to play with toys. Otherwise, Andy going to college just passes along his toys to Molly, movie over. So the toys drive back to Andy's house in a luggage car, much to the confusion of Andy's neighbors. Andy gets home and instantly falls in love with Jessie and Bullseye. The next morning, Andy fixes Woody's arm with some red thread and apparently some extra stuffing as it leaves Woody with one massively oversized bicep. Detail demons that Pixar are, Woody's shoulder naturally does have the red thread in all future appearances, but if that bicep is bigger than the other, it's subtle enough that I possibly just imagined it because I was looking for it. I don't blame them for that at all. I wasn't a fan of it when Toy Story 2 ended, and if it had been carried over into Toy Story 3, it just would have been extremely distracting, Woody having one arm bigger than the other. Jessie and Bullseye are a happy part of the family now, the seeds of the very subtle Buzz and Jessie romance that permeates the rest of the series are planted, having only a slight presence. Incidentally, Jessie's yodeling in this film is done by Mary Kay Bergman, one of her final films if I had to guess, as the movie premiered not long after her tragic suicide. Jessie mostly doesn't yodel in future installments, but I'm pretty sure Joan Cusack herself did the one I can remember, that being in the opening scene of Toy Story 3. Ham and Rex catch an Al's Toy Barn commercial on TV in which Al is too busy crying over the loss of the crown jewels of the collection to really perform properly, which in the film's audio commentary the filmmakers admit makes absolutely no sense. This is the next morning, unless you assume Al is performing a new commercial on a green screen live from Japan. Why the heck would they be seeing his reaction in a commercial? It just doesn't make any sense. But, they couldn't just completely ignore a prominent character's final fate. What do you think this is, a Tim Burton film? No, we had to see him one last time and tie up all the loose ends. Even if it makes no goddamn sense what we see. Yeah, that was a shot at Tim Burton. Have you ever noticed that in Tim Burton's films there are always a bunch of quirky supporting characters who just completely disappear slightly before the climax and are never seen again, the very fact of their existence completely unresolved? Well, I've noticed, and I don't like it. Another thing the creators mentioned in the audio commentary, I watched the whole trilogy with some commentary shortly after Toy Story 3 came out. I had a strong appreciation for Toy Story 3, and just wanted to re-experience the whole series. But what they liked in the commentary, they expressed a liking for a throwaway line early on in the film where Ham mentions talking to the lawn gnome next door. Just a little bit of world building. Lawn gnomes also talk in the Toy Story universe. That makes sense. They joked about making a whole movie about lawn gnomes. Of course, the year after Toy Story 3, we got one. The British film Romeo and Juliet was distributed by Touchstone, so it's a Disney film. It's on Disney Plus, and it is not on my list because I'm just not interested. Fuck it. I've seen parts of it, and yeah, I want to see it. I'm putting Romeo and Juliet on my postscript inspirations. Fortunately, perhaps the much-delayed and very much unasked-for sequel, Sherlock Gnomes, was handled by Paramount and MGM. You need 2 studios to distribute that film, so yeah, I won't be partaking of that one. Anyway, Wheezy plays us out, launching into a new cover of You've Got a Friend in Me, his singing voice incongruously provided by Robert Goulet. That's funny. Goulet! In the film's final moments, Buzz and Woody just agree that they'll enjoy their life with Andy while it lasts, and when it's over, at least they'll still have each other. This film has a blooper reel, and I honestly, they only ever did this 3 times. Even though they're super famous for it, they only ever did it 3 times, and I honestly think they stopped purely just because they just couldn't top how funny it was the first time in A Bug's Life. The Toy Story 2 outtakes, they're not quite as good. The best part to me has always been the absurdist gag of Mrs. Potato Head packing for Mr. Potato Head on the rescue mission just an increasingly massive amount of bizarre objects, which, isn't really a blooper. Another pretty good one is, Woody playing a bunch of pranks on Buzz, and perhaps the most famous is when they expand upon a brief moment from the film in which Heimlich from A Bug's Life is seen crawling along some brambles before Buzz forces his way through them. They expand that so Heimlich and Flick are together talking about their first day on set, and Flick thinking it's for a Bug's Life sequel, while Heimlich has to gently break it to him that that's not the sequel that's being made, just as Buzz crashes into the scene like a monster. It's funny. Okay, there's actually a lot of good ones. It's just the overall nature of it was best the first time in A Bug's Life. Now, they cut one out of the Disney Plus version, like a number of butt cracks I could mention. A brief aside of the prospector trying to seduce a couple of Barbies by promising them more acting jobs, with the casting couch in general starting to be more recognized as the horrific practice it is, not funny at all, and John Lasseter in particular going down for career-spanning sexual harassment. They cut that part out. And, I've wondered how they pulled that off when, the credits are rolling and the music is playing throughout the blooper reel. Apparently, from the looks of things, they cut out the music at some point. Most of the blooper reel is no longer accompanied by music. I guess that works. And, here we go. The band to perform the Woody's Roundup theme song is Riders in the Sky. I don't know if I'm familiar with that band, but I certainly know the song that the band is named after. Cowboy, change your ways today, or with us you will ride, trying to catch the devil's herd across these endless skies. So, okay, Toy Story 2. I didn't pick up on as much as far as Keys and Kingdoms ideas, but maybe that'll change once I listen to this segment again for, well, next episode. The first episode of the Keys and Kingdoms spin-off podcast. Let's see, what ideas did I get from the first Toy Story? List them here. I don't remember talking about these. Did I ever do a recap of 1995? I guess I did, back in February. I have no memory of that. Anyway, moving along. And we are coming to the end of the existence of Disney in the 20th century with Fantasia 2000. Yes, I'm counting Fantasia 2000 as a 1999 film. Most people didn't see it until 2000, yes, but it was before midnight somewhere when it premiered. Maybe I'm just being contrarian or something. I saw this film in an IMAX sort of theater, or some sort of big screen anyway, with my grandmother, and enjoyed it. See, the original plan for Fantasia was for it to be constantly evolving, that it would always be in theaters, and new segments would be swapped in as years went on. This is the closest they ever came to doing that. 7 new segments were animated, taking full advantage of the ways animation and sound mixing had evolved in the 60 years since the first film. And as I finish writing that paragraph, it occurs to me that this may have been explained at the beginning of the film itself. Much like the original Fantasia had Deems Taylor as our host, Fantasia 2000 has a ton of celebrities hosting the segments. These segments are not nearly as famous as those from the original, but they're a lot of fun. Let's see what value they hold for us as we exit the Disney Renaissance. So here's something I was surprised to discover, sometime years ago when I spent a lot of time at the library and rented a lot of films, including both Fantasia films and lots of other Disney ones, is how long the original is, 2 hours and 6 minutes, while Fantasia 2000 is a very short feature, 1 hour and 16 minutes. How long did I talk about Fantasia way back in episode 3? Only about 16 minutes. I'm sure to talk about Fantasia 2000 longer than that. I don't know. I gotta wonder about the changes this Disney segment has gone through that just makes it constantly get longer and longer. But yeah, maybe I won't spend a long time on Fantasia 2000. It's just segments without a ton of story beats. I should start watching the damn film so we could find out. Oh hey, the actual Disney logo from the 90s. I feel like I haven't seen that in ages. All re-releases and such from the revival era, including, Disney Plus, they've replaced the old Disney Castle logo with the modern one, the one with the train chugging in the background and the fireworks and shit. They can't change it here because the 90s logo merges directly with the galactic imagery that instantly plays us in, with a recording of Deems Taylor from the original film once again discussing the multimedia event we're about to see. We start with Beethoven's Fifth. Like one of the pieces in the first one, it's all abstract. Multicolored triangles flutter butterfly-like through a painted landscape of indistinct clouds and water while being menaced by smoky black triangles throughout the galaxy. Pretty sweet. Gives me vibes of armies of demons emerging from hell. The colored triangles are rescued by beams from the heavens, and the black triangles go back to where they came from. Very nice. Steve Martin properly introduces us to Fantasia 2000 and does indeed explain everything about Fantasia I did at the beginning there. Famed Israeli violinist Itzhak Perlman introduces us to the next segment, set to the Italian symphonic piece Pines of Rome. Perlman lampshades, as Deems Taylor did about the first film's Nutcracker Suite, that the sound of the piece inspired something very, very different from its title. So Pines of Rome takes us, not to a Roman pine forest, but to the Arctic Circle, where the northern lights dance, birds fly around, and our focus is on a pair of humpback whales and their playful child. Aw, baby whale. This is the one that stuck out to me the most when I was a kid. It just felt so much more artful and atmospheric than anything I'd ever seen before in animation. Something about whales that's just so surreal and alien, especially when they're in space, which happens a lot in fiction for some reason. It just suits them somehow. Because indeed, some sort of supernova up in the sky grants the 3 whales the power of flight, which they take to as easily as they did swimming in the water, and they fly amongst the seabirds. The baby whale gets himself trapped inside a glacier where he loses his flight and has to find his way out via the water. The shot that stuck out most in my mind is when he's sticking his head out of the water and sees his airborne parents visible through the ice sheet, hovering there waiting for him. A mysterious beam of light gives him his flight powers back, and he reunites with his parents at the top of the iceberg. They dip back into the water and call upon their brethren, and the whole pod of humpbacks takes to the sky. By God, there must be around 100 of them. Real whale pods ain't that numerous. Gosh. The only thing more surreal than flying whales is lots and lots of whales, you know? Because they're big for a bunch of, so a bunch of them, that's intimidating. They breach the clouds as they breached the water before, and fly straight into the eye of a massive lightning storm where they breach the atmosphere and jump out into space. I mean, that was amazing. It's like one of the most brilliant science fiction pulp novellas of all time, but it's a segment in Disney's Fantasia, yeah. I'll never forget experiencing that segment in IMAX or whatever, which is good because the next 3 segments I did forgot them completely before I got the film at the library a decade later. Quincy Jones introduces us to the next short as his friend Ralph Grierson tickles the ivories in anticipation. Inspired by the caricature art style of Al Hirschfeld from the 20s, the composition is George Gershwin's fusion of classical and jazz, Rhapsody in Blue. I'd say this is the segment that stuck with me most as a teenager. It was the whales when I was a kid, but this one, which I totally forgot as a kid, it touched me as a teen. Rhapsody in Blue takes us to 1920s New York, where we follow the lives of 4 people. According to, scripts and background details and such, they are Duke, a construction worker who would much rather be playing drums in a jazz band. Joe, a perfectly nice guy who has no job and just wishes he did, having no money nor anything to do with his time. Rachel, a little girl who'd rather be with her parents than all the instructors and tutors and stuff she gets ferried around to all day. And John, a rich fellow who'd rather do fun things than the stuffy rich person stuff his socialite wife drags him around on. After some establishment of the city setting on our 4 heroes, we get a sad and wistful middle where they all dream of being where they want to be instead of where they at. Eventually, Duke decides to take this job and shove it and ditches the construction site. His equipment ends up by chance in Joe's hands, and Duke's supervisor mistakes Joe for a night shift worker and yells at him to get to work. Thrilled at the lucky break, Joe punches in and gets to work. Rachel chases a bouncy ball into traffic and is rescued by her parents. She's been, kind of very oblivious through the whole thing. John, meanwhile, spots a poster for a jazz club and attends it, getting to see Duke play. Just a solid segment overall. Not much it can tell us about life or the universe, but the art style is great. The daily grind of life is depicted with wonderful style. A highlight being a crowd of people crammed into a subway car like sardines and staying in that exact position as they exit the train and head up the stairs into their place of work. And the highs and lows of the composition are just incredible. It's really good. It's a lot more fun than classical music, which, makes sense as it was written in the 20s with, some jazz fusion. Bette Midler explains to us that the next segment was an idea for the first Fantasia that never came to be. A segment based on Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Steadfast Tin Soldier. Set to a piece boringly named Piano Concerto No. 2, Fantasia 2000's interpretation of the tale is done mostly in CGI, so not something the creators of the original Fantasia could have even imagined. I like The Steadfast Tin Soldier. It's a fun and quirky little adventure. Our hero, as the title suggests, is a tiny toy soldier made of tin. One of a whole box of tin soldiers given as a gift to some kid. Due to the tinsmith not having quite enough tin to finish a whole box of soldiers, our hero has only one leg. And our hero's love interest is a tiny ballerina made of paper, whom he's initially attracted to due to misunderstanding her ballet pose and thinking for a moment that she also has one leg. And our villain is the Jack-in-the-Box, the kid's favorite toy, who is also attracted to the ballerina and deeply, creepily possessive of her. I like what the Disney version does here that I don't see often, and that's, well, the Tin Soldier is clearly a very tiny figure, whereas a Jack-in-the-Box, it's kind of a bigger toy, isn't it? And they make the ballerina to scale with our hero, and so the Jack-in-the-Box is lusting after a girl who's about the size of his nose. It's creepy. I love it. Gosh, the character designs just throughout this entire film, all the segments as far as I can recall, they're just a little different from standard Disney and super attractive. So the Tin Soldier and the paper ballerina flirt in that silent Fantasian manner for a time, and the Jack-in-the-Box gets mad and hurls the soldier out the window, where he's swept away in an abandoned toy boat out into the sewer system. The boat takes him out to sea, where he's swallowed by a fish. That fish gets fished, and taken to market, where it just so happens to be sold to the family of the kid, who sets the now very smelly one-legged soldier back in the box where he belongs. The story calls him steadfast because he takes all that abuse without flinching. Of course, in Anderson's story, you don't have any reason to think that the toys can move, so, it's not like he has any choice but to stay standing through all of it. The Jack-in-the-Box in the original story is implied to be an exception due to it being also implied that he's actually a goblin. Go figure. Of course, the toys could totally move in this Disney version, so our hero can actually be heroic. He rescues his ballerina from the Jack-in-the-Box's unwanted advances and has to fight him. The Jack-in-the-Box takes a tumble into the fireplace, and the soldier and ballerina can be together. Yeah, that ain't how the fairy tale ends. In the story, the boy sees his one-legged soldier again and throws him into the fireplace for absolutely no reason. Then a gust of wind knocks the ballerina in there as well, incinerating her. The next day, a maid cleaning the fireplace discovers all that's left of them, a tiny tin heart with a single sequin from the ballerina miraculously at the heart's center. Disney, of course, is no stranger to giving fairy tales happy endings. Obviously. Of course, in 2006, when they made a short film out of another Anderson story, The Little Match Girl, yeah, they kept the ending to that. I, not knowing how The Little Match Girl ends when watching the Disney short film collection with Natty, I was deeply upset. So, Tin Soldier, fun fairy tale, but like the whale story, more of a surreal experience than anything. Not much for building a world or story, though. Yeah, I'll definitely think about it later on with all of these segments. They can all bring something, yeah? James Earl Jones is our next presenter, telling us that our next musical piece is The Carnival of the Animals, which answers a question mankind has been grappling with for centuries. What would happen if you gave a yo-yo to a flock of flamingos? It's a very, very short segment about a flock of very snooty and conformist flamingos, and the one individualist among them who much prefers to hang around perfecting his yo-yo tricks. They go after him for it, but he gets one over on them in the end. I like it. Underrated. Penn and Teller introduce our next segment. Fittingly enough, a duo of magicians introduce us to, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yeah, they just go ahead and play the most famous segment from the 1940 original. I'm certainly not complaining. Why wouldn't they do that? I don't have much to say about it, man. I'm just going to watch it again. I don't remember what I said about it when I did the original Fantasia back in episode 3 of the podcast, but maybe go back, do a throwback. I would imagine it's by far the longest segment in the film, if I had to guess. All the 2000 shorts are a lot shorter than the ones from 1940. It's really neat seeing this stuff again. I was immersed in it when the collection began 2.5 years ago, you remember? The water effects, the shadow play, just all the stuff about 1940s animation that Jeremy and I were admiring way back then. Done with gel pens. That's a callback. It was Jeremy's theory about how they did the amazing water effects that appear in all of the Golden Age films. Very much doubtful, but hey, I still don't know how they were done. Man, those were good times, the early podcast episodes, first with Jeremy and then with Natty. I've been alone since episode 16, apart from a brief recurrence by my sisters in episode 29. Definitely want to put an end to that, hence the plan to always have a guest segment in every Season 2 podcast episode, and to have Natty and Kenzie co-host the Keys and Kingdoms podcast with me. The solitude on the channel has just grown too much to bear. Mason and I were in the studio a couple of weeks ago editing Better Yet, and it was difficult, and we imagined how much more difficult sound editing and film editing must have been before computers. How to even comprehend that, and yet you had features like Fantasia done not only before computers, but before World War II. That's kind of mind-blowing. After the segment is over, they replay the bit where Mickey, voiced by Walt Disney, congratulates conductor Leopold Stokowski on his good work. They seamlessly transition to then having Mickey turn away from the long-deceased Stokowski, and now a modern Mickey played by Wayne Allwine approaching the new conductor, James Levine, to introduce the next segment, which will star Donald Duck, though Anselmo's Donald is still in the shower and Mickey needs Levine to stall for time. Levine explains that the next piece, Pomp and Circumstance, though linked in the public consciousness to graduation ceremonies, dun 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 dun, it was meant for many purposes, and the animators decided to set it to a retelling of Noah's Ark, starring Donald as Noah's assistant. I like that. I like how they went with pomp and circumstance of all things, It's so ubiquitous, and they tried to make something new with it. I love that. A horn sounds, and pairs of animals from all over the globe line up, heading toward an ark which, in a very nice touch, is far more massive than the well-known dimensions given in the Bible. Large enough to actually house all these animals. Because Noah and the flood, that whole story, it's physically impossible no matter how you reinterpret it. If you think otherwise, don't comment. I don't want to hear about it. Just, it didn't happen, okay? It is a fairy tale. It's cute and it's fun for children. That's the only value it has, okay? Let's just don't turn it into a thing more than that. Noah himself is never really seen clearly. He's a white-bearded fellow, but we never get a good look at his face. And as I said, Donald is his assistant. He's taking attendance of the animals, including a pair of ordinary ducks, which make him do a double take. That's a good gag. Just please stop asking that question in the context of Keys and Kingdoms. In that context, Donald is not a duck. He is a duck-faced native. Specific details on the mysteries of native biology are forthcoming. Just suffice it to say they are not the animals they resemble. I love the lineup of animals they have here. Most depictions of the Ark, they feature all the iconic African animals. Elephants are prominent, lions, hippos, rhinos, always a couple of cute giraffes sticking out the top, Here we see animals from all over the world, and they're mixed together in what's gotta be a very deliberate way. No animal is standing directly next to an animal that comes from the same continent. You got kangaroos from Australia, llamas from South America, lots of North American things like moose, beavers, skunks, raccoons, armadillos. Yeah, armadillos, they get a little obscure with it. I'm seeing some bighorn sheep, penguins, frilled lizards. I've spotted a few types of lemurs, lots of exotic birds. I don't really need to take notes about animal species to include. I love animals so much, I've basically already committed to seeing all the animal species on the planet represented in Keys and Kingdoms and my other fantasy works. There is that classic gag where a dragon, unicorn, and griffin are hanging around outside the Ark, heckling them for being suckers. I've seen that in other places. Not with those specific creatures, just fictional creatures in general. And the main plot of the segment sees Donald getting separated from Daisy just as the floodwaters come, and both of them believing the other has been lost for the duration of the 40-day storm and the year-long voyage that follows. Though actually the segment doesn't give us the impression that very much time passes. We're presented with a few of the logistical problems the Ark would present, namely those of animal instinct. Woodpeckers instinctively pecking at the wood. Predators trying to sneak little gulps of their prey. You want to know how Noah dealt with problems like that? It's a fairy tale, didn't happen, that's how. Okay, I'm sorry. Reiterating that was just mean. Okay. When the sun returns, Donald sends out the dove to look for land, feeling horribly guilty for separating the dove from his mate. Donald and Daisy have been miserable for the whole voyage, each of them alone among millions of devoted couples. The ship lands on the mountaintop, and the animals march out 2 by 2 in rhythm to the familiar graduational orchestration. Once all the animals are gone, Donald and Daisy find each other alive and embrace in intense relief as the world's first rainbow appears overhead. That moved me, people. It moved me. That was a good segment. The final segment is introduced to us by Angela Lansbury, and that's the kind of gravitas it needs. This is probably my favorite segment from the film. I said Pines of Rome was most memorable to me as a kid, and Rhapsody in Blue most memorable to me as a teen, but throughout my whole life, when I think about this film, I think of Stravinsky's The Firebird. I don't know what kind of story the original ballet told, but this Fantasia segment is about a motherfucking firebird. Let's get started. The segment is apparently inspired by the eruption of Mount St. Helens, a volcano in Washington state. The mountain erupted in 1980 and kept on bubbling until 2001, apparently. And according to Wikipedia, it did more stuff from 2004 to 2008, and it's been dormant since, but I can't believe we have volcanoes in the United States, It's the kind of thing you associate with, ancient Rome, maybe, Polynesia way long time ago, but nope, they're very much still around. The U.S. has some big ones, which are years overdue for massive eruptions. I fear for my life every time I think about that shit. Natural disasters just wig me out, There was just an ordinary lightning storm the other day, and I was so afraid. I'm just, anything that the weather or geology or space can do to us, there's just nothing we can do to it if the planet suddenly decides to end, and that scares the shit out of me, so let's try not to think about it. Let's enjoy the Firebird. We open in what may very well be Washington State. The forest has that look, and we follow a lone elk as it wanders around on a fine day in the midst of a spring thaw. We meet the Spring Sprite, a feminine nature spirit who begins spreading life and warmth to the wintry forest. I love the Spring Sprite. She's so beautiful, and the way her body is it's kind of amorphous. She's just very supernatural. On some level, she's more of a force of magic than a person, but on another level, she's someone I would want to date, I think. The sprite finds that her powers don't seem to work on Firebird Mountain, and she investigates, but unfortunately she awakens the Firebird itself. Like Chernobog before him, the Firebird rises out of the mountain and spreads his wings. A massive bird of prey made of lava, he seeps his way through the forest, destroying everything the Spring Sprite created. The Firebird I've discussed as being an elder elemental, which actually maybe ought to be called primordials. I held off on using that word because I was accustomed to that being the term for the elemental gods in D&D 4th edition, but that was just a 4th edition thing. They don't have those elsewhere. I didn't realize the term was up for grabs. It sounds a lot better than elder elementals, so I'm gonna think about that. As for what the Spring Sprite is, I guess she's a sylph. She's much like the nature spirits from the original Fantasia, but like I said, her morphing body. Is she where I got the idea for sylphs that are made of slime? I feel like that'd be doing her dirty, but where else would I have gotten that idea? Anyway, it's sometime later, and there's no sign of the Firebird. The whole forest is in ruins, but the elk has survived. He digs through the ashes and finds the Spring Sprite, and encourages her to start taking back the forest one little step at a time. She starts with the one tree that's still standing, and relieved that she still has power, she spreads her wings once more and brings life back to the whole forest. It's magnificent. So that was damn good. Fantasia 2000. That has a lot of imagery I will think about later. The 1999 recap will come in the first episode of the Keys and Kingdoms podcast, just to kind of kick off what that's all about. Fantasia 2000, man, overall amazing, and with its kind of storytelling, I'm sure this was the shortest Disney movie review I've done in a very long time. 22 minutes, yeah, for sure. So, let's see, I always read the credits, anything to say there? Not really. I'm not seeing any names really jumping out at me. Well, Tim Allen, but I don't think it's the Tim Allen. Just someone in the animation department is named Tim Allen, and that jumped out at me. There we go. There's a noticeable name, Joe Ranft, in the story department of the whole film, not any segment. I wonder what that means. It's okay. This is all setting in for me. This is really happening. Season finale of the podcast. Let's keep it moving. Okay, I had to have a tea break. My voice got more worn out than usual just during that beginning part. Today, it's the final Droon segment. My objective was to spend today's segment talking about my final thoughts on the Secrets of Droon as a whole. I can't possibly. Suffice it to say, I like Droon a whole lot, and I ever so much hope to one day adapt it with even more depth than it ever had before. Bring it to millions of kids of a new generation. And, shortly after finishing up this podcast, I will be starting a series of vlogs, the Droon vlogs, in which you'll see me rereading all the Droon books and thinking even harder about what I do to adapt them to television. Hopefully those vlogs will have a better final thoughts on Droon conclusion than the one you're hearing right now. So what comes next? Well, my original plan, once I was done with Droon, was to replace it with the Harry Potter segment, rereading that series and talking about my fantasies of adapting that story into an anime-style series. Needless to say, I don't really feel like doing that anymore, but I was not overly disappointed about what those horrible revelations meant for my future, I used to read a lot of books, and I picture virtually everything I read being adapted to animation. So I decided to swap out the Droon segment for a Drizzt segment, reading all the books in R.A. Salvatore's Legend of Drizzt series, which was the source material of the parody musical, which was talked about over the course of the first half of the first season of the podcast, before ending because there was just no music or other production forthcoming. It's been very much in stasis since then. And so, yeah, I'll be reading The Legend of Drizzt next, but not here on the podcast. That'll be a series of vlogs as well, done simultaneously with the Secrets of Droon vlogs. I don't know what I was thinking, consolidating everything I wanted to talk about into segments on a single, non-descriptively named podcast. I'm making them their own video series that people searching for videos about Drizzt or Droon might actually find them. And again, I have a lot of books from when I was younger that once I'm done with those two series, I hope to rediscover again. Reading vlogs is going to be a whole big thing. In the meantime, I gotta think of a name for the Keys and Kingdoms podcast that might actually attract people who want to hear about Disney films, you know? Maybe just, the thumbnails and time codes will suffice. And okay, well, we've basically just seen the end of two segments. Well, that's big. This next one's not ending, though. It's at a fairly sensible stopping point for the season finale today. In the fanfiction segment, we're finishing More Than Survival, the fourth book of my Maximum Ride fanfic, but there's a couple more books after that, and enough fanfiction in my past to carry us all the way through Season 2 and a little bit beyond. Maybe even a lot beyond, depending on how much fanfiction I produce over the course of Season 2. Probably not much. It's not something I've been successfully able to prioritize, but I'd like to get somewhere with it, So without further ado, let's finish More Than Survival. In Chapter 33, we're back on the ICBG airplane. Danny is tracking the survivor's base, now with the bead on the tower itself rather than the energy signature of the queso dip. I redid the whole conversation about the queso dip's secret ingredients. Why not? I like that bit. I'm pretty sure I quoted it directly because it was good earlier. Danny is, a little frustrated that there's no pattern to the tower's movements. It's quite random, but some rapport is going on now that all the living members of the ICBG are reunited. Iggy takes Danny aside, and whose POV is this? They haven't spoken in a moment. It's Max. That would be a safe bet. She does most of the chapters. She frets about Angel there in that ever-traveling tower. Iggy has a secret project for Danny, which, due to the promise of it being ready tomorrow, Iggy wants to marry Nudge tomorrow. And Danny also has a secret plan for attacking the survivor's base. Lots of secrets in this chapter is the joke, I guess. I'm not enjoying myself. Next chapter. Okay. Nudge POV. She and Iggy have just said their vows. Why did I always have these teenage characters getting married? Twilight, that's why. That was my barometer for literary relationships. I was young and suffering, and it's really got me through a very, very bad time in my life. So, anyway, the wedding of Iggy and Nudge is a really big production. What do we got? Basic congratulations from their fellow canon characters. Imogen is gracious. The twins are being very seductive with Gazzy. And as Iggy and Nudge flutter off for a moment alone, Aerie points at the coconuts at the buffet table. Oh man. Okay, so Aerie wants Nudge to help her count the coconuts. Nudge counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on 5 she points to Aerie, and Aerie says, "I'm not a coconut." And Nudge says she didn't mean Aerie, she meant her head because it's round and fuzzy. Man, that's taken from something I did to my sister Zia when she was little. That's so funny. I forgot about it. Meanwhile, Keegan appears before Nudge and promises that when she and Iggy want to have a child, it'll healthfully come to term this time and be the great person they dream of their child being. It's essentially a divine blessing, and Nudge is overwhelmed. And so Iggy and Nudge get that private moment they wanted in the middle of their reception. A little crown Iggy can put on, which allows him to see. He lost his vision at a young age, you see, due to experiments done on him. And in recent books, recent at the time of this fanfic, he gained a few mutations that allow him to occasionally detect colors or lines, but this little device that he's just had Danny whip up for him real quick, it allows him to truly look upon Nudge's face and remark on what everyone's always saying about how beautiful she is. He figures he doesn't have time to get accustomed to having vision, given their high-threat lifestyle, but just a small chance to stare at her for a whole day, that's what he wants now. She gets him to a mirror so he can see himself, too, since the night is about both of them, and she hopes that someday he can take the time to learn to operate like that. And they go back to the reception. Well, gosh, that was an incredibly emotional wedding reception chapter, considering the bride and groom were both in their mid-teens. I mean, that major misstep of my young self aside, that was good. That really got to me. That is the emotion of the wedding scene. The intent. Chapter 35, for some reason, begins with an author's note about how much I hate Total. I voice a wish that he had been killed off sometime before it was discovered that he was a talking dog, because, that would be a good scenario in which he was a sympathetic character. Hence why he barely appeared in this fanfic and was recently killed off. Apparently had to vent all that because after treating his few small appearances in the story with a fair amount of respect, I had to let the truth out. I mean, okay. Max and Fang are watching Ray and Ram sparring with each other with swords, observed by Dr. Akana. This is basically, the first time in a while, at least, that Ray and Ram have gotten any face time. I'm loving this moment they have, the demonstration of their physical capabilities as a goat man and a stingray man, that they're identical twins and behave as such stereotypically do. And when Akana asks them about a cure, Ram replies, "A cure for what? Being awesome?" That's a badass reply. I think I've used it elsewhere, more impactfully. I can't remember where. Maybe it's later in this story. Hey, they call themselves Ray and Ram, They're happy as they are. Max is offended that Akana would never consider that question about her, Max, and the flock solely because they are attractive humans, but, they're still mutants who might like to consider a cure a normal life, even though that's really not the case. Max and Fang like flying around, at least. They do that, and they just kind of feel like gods, as some people have called them in, I think maybe just this fanfic, but maybe canon? I don't know, I don't remember. They are a big deal in canon, and if anything, I think I downplay the gravitas of it all here in the story. Later on, Nudge braids Max's hair, and Gazzy, he admits that he's been sleeping with the twins and is considering running away with them. And after Max needles him about how that's not a good idea, he explodes at her that in fact he was pressured into it and feels violated and does not need her judgmental tone. Max hastily apologizes and is devastated. Gazzy breaks into sobs now that he's let it all out, and he really misses his sister. Chapter 36. Okay, I've been anticipating this concept, at least, ever since Max made a quip about her own superpowers earlier, leading to this moment, followed by the dream visions from Angel. Max gets a vision of Angel begging for help, not while she's asleep, but for only a few brief seconds while she's having sex. Apparently, Angel can only intercede when Max's mind is shut off, so either REM sleep or very briefly during orgasm. And remarkably, Max was joking about having the power to see the future under those exact circumstances not long ago. So, I don't know, just something I set up and paid off that I find mildly amusing. I don't know. That aside, they has to save Angel. Their moment must arrive. That night as she sleeps, Max sees Angel again. Angel reports that she's in much worse shape than how she looks in the dream vision, having been starved, poisoned, and tortured by a horrendous, muscular mutant. Max swears to come find her as quickly as she can. Chapter 37, Danny unveils his weapon, the big red button. Yeah, it certainly looks like nothing more than exactly that. They wait for the tower to get into a decent position. They wait, and it turns up in England. They'll never get a better shot than that. They push the big red button, and hundreds of missiles head east at an impossible speed. They're shaped like the big guy and Laura, tribute to the fallen members of the ICBG. The missiles reach the survivor's tower, first breaking through the force field, then hitting a very specific spot that prevents it from teleporting again. It's disabled within an easy flying distance of them now. All that in the 8 seconds before it teleports again? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe that one grumpy reviewer was right. That was a flimsy premise. So the CSM are gathered, and Max declares it's all the flying kids who'll be going after it. John Abbott is alarmed, but Max is like, what the heck did you think was going to happen? A running gag I haven't mentioned yet, I think, concludes here. Little rule of threes deal. When they first arrived at this location, a location I suppose they're leaving forever now, that's well within the spirit of Maximum Ride, I guess. Having a good time there, but now we gotta go. When they arrived, Max's narrative observed the many people who are part of this, and including, someone she spotted in a crowd who she thought looked a lot like Mr. T. Later, she asked Imogen, who's the guy with the Mr. T haircut, and was told that's Mr. T, to her surprise. And here, Max talks to John. She lists the various people he has here, and a deep voice in the crowd yells out, "And Mr. T!" So, yeah, I don't know, just a weird little thing, which I assume doesn't violate fanfiction.net's rule about using real people as characters, it's like a cameo from Mr. T, I guess. Imogen and her flock are ready to join, or at least Imogen is. Sean and Fang really still hate each other. Airy talks Max into letting her come along too. And Fang says goodbye to Bridget, spelling out that though she's a much older woman who's tried to sleep with him and has gone crazy, he thinks of her like a daughter. And so there they go. As the CSM beneath them applaud, these groups take to the skies to cross the, whatever you call that stretch of water that separates Ireland from the big part of the UK. I assume it's a sea of some sort? Yeah. They cross that to get the crippled survivor's tower and save Angel. Chapter 38. Oh, look at that. Just as Max gave a quip in the previous chapter about not knowing, apparently I looked it up between chapters and found it's called the Irish Sea, and had Max comment that she looked it up just there. There are 11 of them flying, and Max works to keep track of them all. That reminds me of the Gargoyles comic book. In Gargoyles, there are 6 gargoyles in the clan for the whole TV series, but the comic books are called clan building, because those numbers more than double by the end of the comic book, and it's, just the end of a lot of very satisfying stories, and it's awesome to see just them all taken off in the end. I wonder if that was intentional on the part of young me. What do we got here in this travel chapter? Well, it's noted that while most of the bird kids do a lot of soaring, Imogen has to flap a lot. Different wings, different biology. Fang and Sean, meanwhile, have turned their exchange of gruesome threats into a game. Oy vey, gruesome threats. When I was a kid, I wrote a lot of particularly gruesome, violent imagery. I guess combination of reading Animorphs and playing Baldur's Gate, I was just desensitized to violence, didn't realize it was not normal. Being older and knowing these ideas were disturbing, I may be able to utilize my ability to come up with shockingly violent scenarios. Max is creeped out by it, but, at least whatever this is getting Fang and Sean to bond. That's the start of a thing. Max now takes this time to confront the twins. Jacqueline is dismissive of the idea that she's, sexually assaulted anyone, but Fallon admits that she and Jackie have reached a point of contention there. Fallon has realized after the fact how shaken Gazzy is, how unwanted it was on his part, and that she's done bad. She's sorry, but Gazzy rejects it, understandably, and that conversation was really not the time for a bunch of jokes about how Max can't understand Fallon's accent, but those would be good jokes in a different context. They make it to the UK around sundown, the Black Stone Tower not looking entirely out of place in the English countryside. They go for it. Chapter 39. In the author's note at the beginning, I note that I've retconned that Lang and Shay are brother and sister, now giving both of them the surname that Shay had before. Not a bad call, as Lang had a similar one. It just seemed to make sense given the dynamic that had organically sprouted between them. So, I'll have to make sure that's not a retcon when they're in Iris. They're a lot like Jackal and Hyena from Gargoyles, the two of them, now I think about it, but funnier. The perfect formation that Max so admired in Sean and the twins, well, that proves their undoing, while Max's people have the sense to scatter when a big net is fired at them. Imogen's subordinates get got. Imogen tends to her people, while Tui splits off to stick with Max's flock, and she's still not actually called Tui in the story. I really thought that was something that Imogen starts calling her early on. Guess not. Guess that happens later on. Okay. So I had a delayed reaction to the fact that the climax of this book is starting. I should be hyped up. Okay. So they enter. Surreal stuff happens. Had I been watching Gargoyles recently or something when I wrote this last quadrant of the story, because this reminds me of Dreamtime scenes in Gargoyles, or that one Illuminati hotel. I know, I keep getting reminded of Gargoyles, so yeah, maybe I just binged it or something when I was writing this. So the flock enter the tower, and they are all frozen from the neck down. They can talk and look around, but they're otherwise held in stasis. And Lao Hu, Lang, and Shay show up and taunt them as usual, along with Grease, Gum, and Mud, who I don't think I even mentioned when they appeared back in the third book of this fanfic. Just 3 sleazy henchmen. I've used that name for many comical trios in my day. Grease, Gum, and Mud. I think they'll end up as the heroes of a highly fictionalized Let's Play series I'm gonna do, where we kind of play a game and also heckle it, Mystery Science Theater style. So if I didn't mention them, which I'm pretty sure I didn't, it was because I thought they were just in that one chapter, but nope, they're back here, and I've just remembered, of course they come back. Their family becomes, not important per se. I don't think they ever really do anything, but they show up, that's what I'm saying. Oh, here's a good gag. I don't remember this part at all. So Lang rips out a chunk of Fang's hair and comments, you gotta use the hairs with little bits of skin on the end, that's where the DNA is. I love that, you're teaching the audience a tiny little science fact, while also making it clear they intend to do something with Fang's DNA without spelling it out, and also giving characterization by having the character casually chat trivia facts with their enemy. That's a lot of work done by one line. I gotta congratulate myself on that one. That's going in the Iris Ideas folder for damn sure. Oh, and then they extract some of his blood, and primary feathers, and several of his fucking teeth. Holy shit, that is a brief and random comedy bit that serves in like 5 seconds to make you really want Fang to be the one to kill these two. Damn. That's good. I don't know if I knew what I had in this moment. It's truly savage. And, oh man, yeah, that's a moment that's awesome in a lot of ways. Anyway, the flock are taken before Marian Jansen. Iggy recognizes her voice, even though I don't think any of the boys actually met Jansen in canon. I'm pretty sure at that point in the third Max book, it's just the girls. I don't really remember the books very well, though. Anyway, Iggy refers to Marian as the middle-aged mutant ninja turtle. That's an allusion to a revelation made near the end of the aforementioned Book 3, in which Jansen, apropos of nothing, just after everything that's happened, tells Max that she's a mutant too. She's part Galapagos giant tortoise and is therefore over 100 years old, despite her not that old appearance. The revelation in the book, retroactively, now that I think back on it, it really comes out of nowhere, adds nothing to the story, and doesn't make much sense with the technology displayed in the series, but I remembered it, I guess. Jewel enters the room, but to Jansen's surprise, he doesn't care much that the flock are there. He just picks a CD off a rack. How about that? But Jansen has Kelly. Max compares Kelly to Omega. I forgot about Omega. I think he was like this really stupid mutant in Book 3 who was supposed to replace Max. I forgot he existed. I assume he's dead. The Maximum Ride books were frustrating sometimes, but in a good way, It was, because so many people were like controlling our heroes and jerking them around, and yeah, and you just want to see them get out of that, So, as is their usual MO, the flock listen to Jansen's spiel and just heckle it the whole time, not taking the threat seriously for a moment, as long as they're, face-to-face with their enemies. Jansen gives some stats on Kelly, which I do well to remember. She can alter her appearance, as we've seen, and we learned that she's venomous, has a stunning screech like a banshee, a hypnotic gaze. Yeah, that's all not been exhibited yet before. And, of course, strength, speed, and agility, like you couldn't imagine, which has been pretty well established, I think. Jansen also mentions that Kelly shares the same genetic material from which Max was made, that of Valencia Martinez and Jeb Batchelder, even with some DNA extracted from Tui to be absolutely sure that Kelly would strongly resemble Max. Max doesn't think much of that fact in the moment. It will start to get to her later, which is odd. I'm not the type to think that blood matters, but maybe I wasn't really there yet with that realization. Maybe I thought it was important. Maybe I just felt comfortable writing characters with different beliefs about family than I have. Nothing wrong with that. What Max wonders right now is how many Kellys Janssen heartlessly killed off before she got to the current Kelly she claims to love as a daughter. Janssen does not deny this charge, which genuinely throws Kelly off her guard. But there's no time for that right now, as Janssen takes Max aside for a private word, warning her that any funny business will result in Kelly striking and taking out the whole flock. Chapter 40, 40 out of 42. Let's do this, I remember this. The grumpy reviewer I mentioned earlier thought I handled this and what followed it throughout the next book rather poorly, and I certainly think they were right on the money regarding the big red button, so we'll see. Janssen says to Max, "I am so tired." Max has no sympathy, but Janssen just wants Max to stop thwarting her plans. She will give Angel back to the flock if they'll all just go away and live someplace else, well out of the survivors' reach, where they will not be harmed. Angel being in the hands of the torturer is a good incentive to at least claim to take Janssen up on that deal. The torturer, incidentally, totally gonna appear in Iris, but probably not as an individual, probably as like a whole breed of mutants there. Torturer is a pretty specific name, though maybe I'll call them Tormentors instead. I thought I had literally just now, but yeah, I mean, when putting together the Iris universe, I definitely knew that the idea for this Torturer mutant, that's gonna be a thing. So Max takes the deal. Angel is returned safely-ish, but Janssen knows Max has no intentions of following through. The Torturer, did I describe him earlier? No idea. Well, he's 8 feet tall with gray skin, crazy huge muscles, and as Max sees his face up close, he's got white eyes, no teeth, that's an interesting, and hair fashioned like devil horns. You know, this is very anime, I think. Would this have been around when I first started watching anime? Maybe so. I first heard the name Maximum Ride from an issue of a manga and manhwa magazine my aunt gave me, whose cover story was a chapter of the Maximum Ride manhwa and included a chapter of the Soul Eater manga. And that kind of got me into anime later on when Netflix first started switching over from sending you DVDs in the mail to streaming. So yeah, this Torturer guy just feels a bit like an anime-style monster. I'm not sure. For the record, I've never said the word manhwa aloud in my life until just now. I may have butchered it. I don't know. Just, hearing myself say it for the first time just sounded a little off. Wait, I keep getting sidetracked about this torturer guy. The point is, he's here to incentivize Max not to be a hero. He pins Max down and very slowly, very painfully, removes her forearm. One knuckle bone at a time, then once all her fingers are gone, what remains of her hand at the wrist, then takes off her forearm at the elbow. You know what? I think I depicted what a painful experience that was rather well. The reviewer said I treated it as a minor annoyance. Nuh-uh. The reason that the words of this particular reviewer, stick out to me, like I'm not rereading old reviews as I reread the story, though maybe I should, but yeah, no, just those memories are coming back as I read it. Just this person's criticism of the later chapters of this book and the early portions of the next one, it was like, one of those very few negative reviews that I ever got, I didn't get a lot of reviews, and, when you don't get a lot of reviews, you don't get a lot of negative ones. So it didn't, super hurt my feelings, as far as I can recall, but, I remembered what they said and kept it in mind. I mean, that this reviewer very suddenly started lashing out when they'd been very kind from the story's beginning, it's also, I assumed, helped it stick out in my mind. I don't remember that reviewer's name, or if they went on to finish the story after that incident. If so, I don't think they had anything else bad to say about it, but maybe something will come back to my memory as I keep reading. But yeah, I just think I caught them in a really bad mood one day and they lashed out, hence the grumpy qualifier I've been adding. So, Max loses her forearm, and she gets bandaged poorly and sent away to join her flock in Imogen so that, they and the bad guys can part ways peacefully. Max tries to bring Angel along, but has to drag her. Angel is completely catatonic and unresponsive to everything. Chapter 41, Jewel watches all the mutant kids getting away, vaguely aware of how there seem to be a few more of them than usual, just not terribly focused on it. The flocks vanish. and the teleportation circuit of the tower has been repaired, so they're in first a desert, but then someplace violently rainy. I like that moment. This whole teleporting tower thing is pretty stupid in the context of this story, and would carry a lot of logistical problems in any story, but dang, it sure allows for cool atmospheric moments like that. Probably shouldn't happen every 8 seconds, though. There should be more time to let those moods settle in. Kelly lurks around, explaining to Jewel that she's just now been allowed to reveal her existence to everyone in the tower, having stayed hidden, known only to Jansen, for a long time. And she likes being out in the open. Kelly's relationship with Jansen, and starting to realize that her creator is fallible, reminds Jewel of his own past with the big guy, and we're shown that, surprisingly, Jewel carries a photo of the big guy on his person. He still has that dash of sentimentality. And, okay, well, all of this is just hella contrived. Jewel sees a tiny gecko, exactly like the big guy, walking along in the tower. Come on, how often do you meet a powder blue gecko randomly? That's odd. Kelly talks about how she'd hate to damage Jewel. And Jewel has this feeling that, okay, I think could have been foreshadowed better. Jewel throughout this book has just been kind of drifting aimlessly and not really sure what he's doing, and I think I could have better led up to the decision he makes here. But that's that, realize that, robotics like himself, he's a very advanced work of art. He's not only an incredibly advanced robot and a feat of engineering, but also of art, I mean, he's bejeweled, for aesthetic reasons. And he realizes that, recombinant mutants like Kelly, like the big guy, all the way to Max herself, are also works of art that should not be damaged. He vows to never hurt a mutant again as long as he lives. Lau Hu finds this a charming new bit of just words to live by. Something to give Jewel purpose, while Lang and Shay feel they've picked the right time to get a bag full of Fang's DNA. I imagine we'll see very soon what they intended to do with that. Elsewhere, Jansen speaks to Headmaster, who is upset by her decision to try to get the flock out of their hair forever. Headmaster wants the flock collected. Headmaster assures Jansen that this mistake can be overcome. Indeed, Headmaster says several things to Jansen which are, in a manner I certainly hope the Maximum Ride readers in the audience picked up on. I don't recall. They were very deliberately reflections to things the voice said to Max in the early books in the series. We've established that Headmaster is not actually the voice, but we see here that they sound the same for a reason. And Headmaster says to Jansen, like I said, paraphrases, I assume, of things the voice said. That he is her friend, that no one loves her more than he does, that she must conquer her fears and weaknesses and remember who she is, and that the ride now begins. Now that I think about it, maybe those weren't paraphrases. Maybe those were verbatim things the voice says specifically at the end of the first Maximum Ride book, because I only felt like looking at that one moment and just took it all from there. I'm bad at research, I could have... Would have been better if I'd found voice quotes from all over the book series, but I know that would have been harder for me to do, and also harder for the fans to have picked up on, I should think. Meanwhile, Keegan looks out her window and feels that something has begun. What it is, she can't sense no matter how hard she looks. It should be impossible for there to be any piece of information she can't find with her omnipotent powers, so she is filled with fear. So that was cool, a third-person perspective chapter that visited several different places. I like it. Chapter 42. Our fanfiction segment's usually almost 30 minutes long. Why is everything I do just grow longer and longer? Anyway, Max drags Angel along, and they leave the tower, finding themselves in some desert somewhere. Max is shocked that the tower is already back to teleporting around, but the two flocks together flee the tower, remaining in the desert before it vanishes. Angel becomes lucid, shocked at Max's arm being gone, even though she was standing right there for it, and bursts into tears, apologizing for everything she said and done. Max forgives, and the flock embrace. And now with Aerie and Tui, the latter fully accepted by Angel, they are 8 instead of 6. That's a bit of a presumptuous thing for a fanfic to do, but I think I spent enough time earning it, that it works to come to that conclusion after all this time. Imogen offers to make it 12 instead of 8, but Max declines there. She likes Imogen being a leader and doesn't want to step on that. They'll work together as 2 separate units, besides which Sean and the twins have been rather contemptible. Angel picks up on recent events through mind reading and is furious at Jacqueline and Fallon for what they've done to Gazzy. She calls them bosomy, red-headed, diminutive cockney bitches, which is for certain an iconic string of insults, even though most of the words within it aren't insults at all, but somehow I strung them together really well, I guess. Oh man, it reminds me of something. Maybe I just used the phrase again a few times, I don't know. Tui, meanwhile, is just overcome with emotion, and I convey that really well. Oh, this might be the first occurrence of it, I think. I think I'm very good at writing characters just starting to blubber incoherently. I guess because it's the thing that goes on in my family a little bit. Here it's conveyed as massive dry heaves, which I convey by just, hitting the letter H a bunch of times, like H spells with every exhale having as many words out as she could possibly squeeze out, conveyed like this often is by not putting any spaces between words and just dashes between sentences. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love it. Oh, and now they just have to wonder where they are. All they know is that it's a desert of some sort. That mystery, where they are, and what they do next, that continues in Book 5, which I entitled Flyin'. And when Season 2 of the podcast starts, we'll get on into that. So, final thoughts on More Than Survival and the story so far? I'm just not sure. Well, if you're listening to this, what do you think about what you've heard so far in the fanfiction segment? I know I'm pleased to see, how I really didn't have the OCs hamstring the story. On the contrary, all the OCs in this story before Imogen and her people turned up, and exceptions being Keegan, and I guess most of the villains get pretty good face time, but, I don't know, a lot of my OCs almost have the problem of just not being around enough for people to really care that they're there. It's not exactly better than new characters taking over the story. It's just a different way of failing to strike the balance of writing a character, fanfic, OC, or otherwise. Again, if you're listening to this part, Natty or Kinsey or whoever's out there, I just like to know what you're thinking of all this. I know you're probably pretty lost as you didn't read Maximum Ride, but I know that Natty at least listens to this segment anyway, so do let me know. Love you, babe. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing this fanfic series in Season 2, and especially of getting beyond the Maximum Ride fix into other stuff I did after that stuff. It's probably a lot more exciting and accessible. Of course, I didn't write all of it after this Max saga. The next 2 stories I'll be talking about, I started writing them during the writing of the Max saga. They just, ended way after. Because, I think at this point I stopped dividing fanfics into books. Yeah. So, who's ready to see this particular Patreon bumper one last time, huh? TAPAS and Stuff Productions is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including Knight Sadie Allen. That being said, let's talk about what you can expect from TAPAS Phase 2. Season 2 of the podcast will start at some point, when I am good and ready, and so will everything else about Phase 2. For now, as soon as this podcast drops, or, maybe even before, I'll be unveiling the new banner, the new logo, changing all the TAPAS social media, so that Patreon link you just saw, that's going to change. It's going to be a TAPAS Patreon, not a me Patreon. I only made it a me Patreon in the first place because I had this feeling like maybe it was illegal to claim to be a corporation when I'm not, which is probably true, but I'm making no such claim. It's still set as a personal Patreon. I've always been open about the fact that TAPAS is basically just me, but you are supporting everyone else if you support the TAPAS Patreon because I give them money a lot. So, and then, yes, setting up a TAPAS Twitter and Instagram and just hopefully having things to say there. And in fact, I've got a few little ideas already. And, yeah, actually proceeding into Phase 2 when I am good and ready. For one thing, getting my computer into the repair shop and cleaning the fan so it doesn't overheat. Apparently overheating wasn't the problem because that changed nothing. Gonna take it into the repair shop as soon as I can to figure out what's actually going on. Here's what you can expect from Season 2 of the TAPAS podcast. Well, I'm bringing back the Team Salmon segment. In the first half of the first season, I would often talk about various project ideas, and, that eventually fizzled out because they weren't going anywhere, but I'm bringing it back as truly a team segment. Every episode will have a guest I'll chat with about projects they specifically have helped with in the past and are working toward in the future. I think it'll be a ton of fun. Further, I will be continuing the fanfiction segment, naturally, and since I'm spinning off the Disney films and the book reviews off into their own series, well, the podcast needed more segments, and at the suggestion of Kenzie, the third segment will be about my inspirations. It'll start with a long list of inspiring things I used to have on my old fanfiction profile. I'll do my best to just kind of rediscover all of these things, gather information, talk about them in detail, what they're about and what I like about them. They'll probably have guests too, people I know also like those things. Next thing we're going to do, well, I haven't seen Natty and Kenzie in the comments section for a while, so I need to force them to catch up on the last few episodes of the TAPAS podcast so they're prepared to co-host the Keys and Kingdoms podcast with me. So that'll come, whenever that happens. And then, there'll also be Droon vlogs, Dritz vlogs, and many, many big projects. We have big things in our future that we're working on that I haven't talked about here for a while because, partly because I've been sort of mechanically just doing the 3 segments for months now, but mostly because, these are things that are really going to happen, and it'd be a shame to spoil them while they're still in development. So, let's see. You're looking at the Phase 1 TAPAS logo right now. Natty designed it. She's sad to see it go. She regrets that she didn't have the technology to make a better one. We'll get there, baby. We're working with the tools we have right now. Let's not be sad. And here are the 2 new TAPAS logos. Designed by Sadie Allen, wonderful artist I've known for a long time, and, that one high-tier patron you've heard so much about on at the ending of videos for a while. So I'm off to, set up the new TAPAS logo and the banner. This banner, this thing right here, the stars of all of TAPAS' original stories done by all of our wonderful artists. I mean, I probably don't need to show you these. They'll be everywhere on the internet where you see TAPAS well before anyone listens to the end of this episode, but just keep in mind that technically this was the unveiling, kind of. Alright, let's bring back that old logo for one final farewell. That's nice. Thanks for everything, Phase 1. It's been awesome. But it's also been a struggle, and it's also been, too quiet for my liking. I'm ready for new horizons. May TAPAS Phase 2 commence.